Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Today I'm going to talk about intention. I was part of a group years and years ago where one of the things we wanted to learn about was self-responsibility. And part of that was intention and our relationship with intention. And we had this kind of thought experiment which said, if something happens, whatever it is, that means that must have been my intention. So I break my leg, that was my intention. I crash my car, that was my intention. I passed my driving test, that was my intention. I have a wonderful relationship, that was my intention. My relationship breaks up, that was my intention. Now, our purpose in doing that, as I understand it, and there were a lot of us, so everyone has their own version of this, was to disconnect us from that part which says, nothing is my responsibility. I didn't bring anything about. None of it's, I can't blame or give responsibility to anyone or anything else for anything that happens to me in my life. And the purpose behind that was to create empowerment and sovereignty. The experience of being in charge of our own destiny, of being the source of our own experience and of our own lives. And from that point of view, that was incredibly helpful. Unfortunately, there was another side to it, which is it could also lend itself in our darker moments to self-blame, to beating ourselves up for every single thing that happened. And we could extend that and beat ourselves up for things that are happening on the other side of the world to other people by saying, well, that's happening, so that must have been my intention. Therefore, I'm an evil, horrible, wicked human being. Now, of course, that isn't helpful. You could argue that it is helpful to say, right, something awful is happening on the other side of the world, or in my country, or in my kitchen, or in my living room. Something awful is happening. Could I be in some way contributive to that by something I've done or not done, or said or not said? That's absolutely fine, because what's happening there is we're entering into a state of inquiry where we're prepared to take responsibility for things, but we're not going into the realm of undermining ourselves by giving ourselves blame. So that was a whole experience and relationship with exploring intention. Now, several decades further on, I'm now looking at it in a slightly different way. I'm now looking at it to say, it seems to me at any point in time, we have an intention or several intentions. And at any point in time, those intentions, and I'm using the word intention, I think there are many other words that could be used for what I'm talking about, because there isn't a single word which is perfect, but this is the one that's closest that I found. So we have intentions all the time, and some of those we're very conscious of, and some we're not conscious of, and some of them we have an illusion about. So sometimes we think we have one intention, and really we have a different one. And I find this very, very useful to explore because of the power of intention. And I think the mindfulness people talk about this as well, and the manifestation people talk about this, where they say, if we can connect with the power of our intention, we then manifest what we want in the world. So an intention that we might have, but not realize we have, could be in a relationship where we think our intention is to have things work out well with somebody, but really our intention is to prove them wrong about something. But that intention to prove them wrong about something is something that we're not conscious of. It's on our unconscious level. So it's an ego thing. It's a competitive thing. It's almost an infantile thing, you could even say. That kind of part of us we may not be proud of, but the intention is still there under the surface. Now, if that is actually the intention under the surface, well, we are believing that our true and full and total and absolute intention is to have things go well, then guess what? When we try and have things go well, it's going to feel very awkward, it's not going to run smoothly, and it may not actually work. Or if it does work temporarily, it's not going to stick, not in the same way. Now, I'm ignoring the other person's intention entirely for this particular example, because that does come into play, of course. But I think we've all had situations where we suddenly think to ourselves, why on earth did I say that? Why did I do that when I meant to do this? Why did I let that happen? Why did I cause that to happen? Why am I my own worst enemy in that situation? Now, my suggestion is these are situations where that we have an intention that we are not aware of, we're not conscious of it. But it still has power, regardless of the fact we're not conscious of it. And it actually interferes with the intention that we are conscious of. It undermines it. And in worst cases, it can lead to an inner fragmentation, awful inner conflict and distress. In a slightly milder example, it can lead just to a kind of a sludginess, where everything is perceived as a kind of a muddy brown or a sort of yucky, rotten yellow kind of tone to our experience of life in terms of what we're looking at visually, what we're listening to, how we feel in our bodies, how we feel in our spirit, how our energy might feel. And it can even affect our skin tone, how our eyes, the sparkle in our eyes, our tone of voice, our posture, our energy, the way we move. All of these things can be affected by a lack of awareness of these hidden intentions that we have. Now, anyone who's sitting there thinking, oh no, so now the news is I've got these negative hidden intentions. Oh no, how am I going to get better? Oh no, that means I'm a bad person. Let me just suggest you put a pin in that for now, just kind of put that on one side, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying part of our makeup is there are things happening below the surface that we're not necessarily aware of. And sometimes those things have got a power to them in terms of an intention. And sometimes that means things go the way we did not consciously hope they're going to go. Because part of us, that's what wanted it to go that way for some reason. So the first thing I would say is it's really, really useful to find ways to explore some of these inner intentions. And this can be done through all kinds of practices, whether it's meditation, yoga, dance, walking, journaling, sun gazing, someone was talking about today, all kinds of things that we can do that help us to open up and look within and recognize all these different multi-layers of motivations and intentions that we have within us. Not with a view to change them, but with a view to shine a light on them and recognize them. Because that's puts us in a position to actually say to ourselves, which of those do I really feel I can get behind? It expands our range of conscious influence in our lives. Because what it does is it brings that entire community, if you like, of motivations and intentions within our reach. We can then conduct a kind of inner negotiation within ourselves. Parts negotiation is excellent for this, also known as subpersonalities or ego states. Is a brilliant way to explore this kind of thing. Because when you do that, what you're doing is you're giving every motivation and every intention validity and space and airtime to communicate and express without trying to say which one is right, which one is wrong. No, we're saying they all have something to say. They're all there for a good reason. Or they were originally formed for a good reason. That good reason may no longer be there, but let's explore it. And that brings me on to actually what I thought I was going to talk about at the beginning of this conversation, but realized that what I've just said was more important to begin with, which is about some of the ways that we can express and strengthen and manifest our intentions in a conscious way by choice. And here are some words for that I like. So we have invocations. We can invoke what we want, whether that's an energy or something tangible or a feeling. Stated intentions, which can be in words. Affirmations, which is where we speak as if something is already true, or where we speak where we're affirming that we are on our way to that thing being true. Prayers. This is more devotional. This is where we're giving gratitude for what we have and our capacities and our abilities to come up with ideas about what we want. And the askings, asking for what we want and need. And dedications. Dedications are where we dedicate ourselves to something. We say, I'm putting my energy behind this, whatever it is. I'm putting my personal power behind this dedication. I dedicate myself to this. Now, one or other of those words may have actually resonated with you. You may be very connected to one of those. We all have our own optimum way of relating with our intention, with expressing it, and with giving it power. So the invitation I would like to extend to you this week is to notice when you are doing an invocation, where you're expressing an intention or feeling an intention clearly, when you are affirming something or making an affirmation, when it's more in the form of a prayer or an asking or a dedication or some other version of this, where you recognize in that moment that you are giving energy to an intention and you're doing it by choice. I also invite you to explore and notice when you realize that you've had an intention that you weren't conscious of, where something's come about and you realize, oh God, actually something in me caused that to happen. Something in me wanted that to happen, but I didn't realize. So explore both, explore the conscious and the unconscious. And as you do it, notice the methods or the practices or the structures that are most helpful for you in working with this. I'll give you a couple of examples of my own. One of mine that I like is to go outside and stand and look up at the sky and in my own mind just run through an affirmation of the beauty of life and the beauty of the world. And on a good day, I can extend that to the beauty of myself. So that's an affirmation. And that comes from a conscious intention I have, which is to be open and receptive to the gifts of life. And that intention actually links back to some of my other more pragmatic intentions, because I feel that's a very powerful ingredient in me living the life I want to live and manifesting and contributing in the way I want to contribute. Another one for me is dance. As some of you know, I go to an ecstatic dance on the first Saturday of every month and other times when I can. And I have an intention to let go and drop into the body. I always have that intention. And again, to receive the gifts of the body and to allow the body to transform whatever needs to be transformed within me and to allow whatever wants to be expressed within me to come out in the form of movement and dance. So that is another common intention that I have. Or I may have an invocation, which might be something along the lines of, I want this next podcast episode to really contribute something to the listeners. And if it's a specific guest where there's something specific, I hope to come through with that particular guest, some particular theme or essence. I might have an invocation in my own mind, where I'm invoking that. I'm calling that into being. So I think one thing all of these forms of intention have in common is responsibility, self-responsibility, in the sense of I am standing here, I am calling for this, I'm intending this, I'm invoking this. I'm not begging for it. I'm not asking the universe or anyone or anything to rescue me from my own powerlessness and helplessness. So I'm not reinforcing the idea that I'm not responsible for my life. I'm reinforcing the idea that I am responsible for myself, for my life, and for my contribution, and for that which I receive, even when what I'm receiving is obviously coming from something much bigger than me, like the universe. So there's something about a stance of self-responsibility around all of this, and I think that's what really makes it work. So we can use the same practice, the same structure, the same words in two different ways. If we're using it in the way of, please universe, or please God, give me this because I can't get it for myself, or because I don't have the power, or because, my words are not strong enough, then that's another way of saying I'm helpless. And guess what? If that's what we're doing, then what we're doing there is we're coming from an inner intention to be a victim, to be powerless, to be helpless. And this can be quite a hard thing to think about, because some of us actually are in a situation where we're suffering in one way or another, or where we are the victim of circumstance or situation in a real physical sense. So asking ourselves to step aside from that particular mindset is particularly challenging. That said, there are many of us who are in a very advantaged situation, highly privileged, who also adopt the anti-self-responsibility mindset. So it can actually exist in any situation. So yeah, before I carry on into yet another theme, I invite you this week to notice your intentions, notice your invocations, your affirmations, your prayers, your askings, your dedications. Notice when they're conscious, notice when there's evidence of them because they've been unconscious. And just look and see which structures, practices, methods really, really support you best in playing with this. And look and see how much power is released in your life. And look and see how much extra alignment and congruency you experience on an inner level. So that's all for Truth and Transcendence for today. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Please give a thumbs up, tell your friends, write a review. You know what to do. I'm so grateful for all my listeners, you and everyone else out there, for supporting the show. And it's fantastic because there are people watching and listening in over 100 countries now. So the benefits of these conversations and the wonderful conversations with my amazing guests are spreading far and wide. So thank you for supporting and helping with that. Until we meet again, have a fantastic week. I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.